Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Good Lawyers Gone Bad podcast. My name is Stuart Teicher. Today's story is ripped from the headlines. The good lawyer that we're going to consider whether he's gone bad is none other than former director of the FBI, James Comey. Now, I'm sure that you've heard that James Comey has been indicted by a grand jury, and this podcast is not going to be about the merit or lack of merit of that indictment. You see, I don't talk politics on the Good Lawyers Gone Bad podcast. I tell stories. And while today's story is about politics, it won't be political. And I'm sure that no matter which side of the aisle you sit on, you're going to find this story fascinating. The reason is that there's something very unique about James Comey. James Comey was able to achieve something that no person on the face of the earth ever thought was possible. James Comey got Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump to agree on something. And the thing they agree on is that they both hate James Comey. The reason that Donald Trump hates Comey is obvious. It's in every newspaper, blog, social media site. It's all over the place today. But many of you might not appreciate why Hillary Clinton hates him too. And oh, she does. It goes back to the Clinton-Trump presidential campaign. And by the way, do you know how long ago that was? I'm sorry to do the math for you, but it was 10 years ago. Yeah, it hurts when you look at the calendar, doesn't it? That's one reason, though, that I thought it would be interesting to tell this story. I mean, if you're a 25-year-old podcast listener, then you were 15 at the time that Hillary's hatred was born. Chances are you didn't follow politics so closely when you were in middle school. And if you're older, well, it's been a while, so I thought this would be a neat deep dive into an interesting story that you might not completely remember, or maybe you even really never knew the details. Well, remember to follow the podcast and rate us on whatever podcast platform you use. And enjoy today's episode, Why Hillary Hates Jim Comey. Saeed Marouk was a criminal. Well, that's the way his government saw him. The truth is, the only crime Saeed Marouk committed was being a member of the indigenous people of his country. A country that was invaded by foreign armies years ago. A country whose indigenous people would ultimately be suppressed by those invaders for generations. You see, Saeed Marouk was a Berber living in Libya. Libya is located in North Africa. The entire northern section of that continent is part of what's known today as the Arab world. Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, Libya, they're all part of the 22 countries that make up the current Arab world. But it wasn't always that way. There were tons of indigenous people who lived across North Africa for thousands of years. The most prominent of those groups were probably the Berbers. But the Berbers were conquered by invading imperialist armies during the Arab conquest in the 7th century. The Arab armies started in the Arabian Peninsula, that's where Arabs come from, Arabia, and they spread throughout the Middle East, into Asia, and also west into Africa. That invasion completely changed the entirety of North Africa, and it meant that the indigenous people like the Berbers were brutally suppressed. Some Berbers were forced into exile, others were forced to assimilate, and successive rulers in North Africa all tried to stamp out the Berber culture. But despite the continuous efforts by the descendants of the invading imperialists to eliminate the indigenous people, a community of Berbers remained in North Africa the entire time. Among them was a brave man named Saeed Marouk, who desperately tried to preserve the heritage of his people in the North African nation of Libya. But in 1976, that bravery would lead to catastrophic consequences. Saeed Marouk did what most other people didn't dare do. He promoted Berber freedom using his own name. And while that made him a hero among his people, it made him an enemy to the state, and that is why the Libyan intelligence services had him on their radar. In February of 1979, Saeed Marouk was walking down the street in Tripoli, Libya. He was heading to the pharmacy to buy medicine for his child. As Saeed crossed the street, he surely heard the revving engine of a car racing down the road. As the noise from the engine grew louder, he probably turned his head trying to figure out what was going on. It was then that he'd realized that the car was careening in his direction. Saeed ran to the other side of the road, trying to get out of the path of the vehicle, but the car switched directions and made a beeline directly toward Saeed. Saeed woke up in the hospital the next day. He had a broken arm, a broken leg, a cracked skull, and a broken back. Saeed was paralyzed from the waist down. The official police report would state that it was an auto accident that caused Saeed Marouk's injuries, but the Berber community believed otherwise. They believed that Saeed was the target of an attempted assassination and that it was orchestrated by the country's ruthless leader, Muammar Gaddafi. Muammar Gaddafi came to power in Libya 10 years earlier by mounting a bloodless coup against the existing government. After taking control, Gaddafi established the Libyan Arab Republic. But the name of that country was misleading. It wasn't anything near a republic. It was a dictatorship. And over the next 40 years, Muammar Gaddafi would rule with an iron fist. Saeed Marouk would die in 1994, a result of complications from a myriad of health problems, all of which were caused by that botched assassination attempt. But while Saeed would perish, the plight of his people would continue. Muammar Gaddafi didn't just cause problems for the Berbers. Decades of ruthless oppression of his people and support of worldwide terrorism made him a problem for Western powers as well. But the manner in which the West dealt with Gaddafi was just strange. They could never get it right. He'd always baffled Western powers. Politicians from both sides of the aisle agreed that Gaddafi was a problem, but they all struggled with formulating a coherent position about how to deal with the man. They tried everything from appeasement to opposition, and nothing seemed to work. Until 2011. In 2011, a street vendor in the neighboring country of Tunisia set himself on fire in protest of the government. News of the vendor's act of defiance was carried beyond the Tunisian border, and it led to a series of anti-government protests, uprisings, and armed rebellions, and all of that spread across much of the Arab world. The year 2011 became known as the Arab Spring. That opposition sentiment, it spread to Libya as well. And one incident set off a chain of events that would lead to massive change in the country. In February of 2011, the Gaddafi government arrested a human rights lawyer who was representing victims of a massacre that occurred inside one of Libya's notoriously violent prisons. That arrest sent citizens to the streets. And when the Gaddafi government responded to those protests by opening fire on the protesters, it pushed the country towards all-out civil war. The Western world saw this as their opportunity to get rid of Muammar Gaddafi. The Obama administration decided to send in some support for the rebels. In April of 2011, U.S. envoy Christopher Stevens arrived in Libya to support the rebel initiative. And unlike previous times where people tried to stand up to Muammar Gaddafi, this time the rebel initiative had legs. The fire burning in the hearts of those rebels would not be extinguished, and a few months later the Gaddafi government was overthrown. Christopher Stevens was then promoted from U.S. envoy to the official United States ambassador to the country of Libya. Ambassador Stevens had the unenviable task of trying to get the Libyan people to support the types of initiatives that were important to the American administration. So toward that end, one fall day, he traveled from his office in Tripoli to the Libyan city of Benghazi. He went there to conduct outreach to the local population and help fill some staffing positions that were open. The date was September 11th, 2012, the anniversary of the worst terror attack in United States history. As evening settled over the compound that night, armed militants affiliated with the Al-Qaeda terror group began gathering outside the gates. Soon, the United States delegation inside the compound heard scattered gunfire. But that scattered gunfire quickly escalated into a coordinated assault. The attackers breached the perimeter, and once inside, they set buildings ablaze with diesel fuel and tire fires. Those fires sent a thick, choking smoke billowing through the corridors of the buildings. Ambassador Stevens and an IT specialist took refuge in a safe room, but the smoke from those tire fires was relentless. A security officer made desperate attempts to reach them through the smoke-filled building, but when he finally found them, the IT specialist was dead and Stevens was unconscious. Despite rescue efforts, Ambassador Stevens could not be revived. 7 miles away at a CIA annex, former Navy SEALs who were working as security contractors received urgent calls for help. The SEALs eventually made their way to the diplomatic compound and then tried to defend the CIA annex. Throughout the night, they fought wave after wave of attackers. But as dawn approached, a mortar shot by the al-Qaeda forces found its mark. Both SEALs were killed instantly. By morning, 4 Americans were dead. Television viewers around the world woke up to videos of the lifeless body of Ambassador Stevens being dragged through the streets of Benghazi. The entire debacle was a disaster for the Obama administration. There were all kinds of allegations being thrown around, the most serious of which involved whether there was a delay in getting help to Ambassador Stevens. Some people allege that a CIA base chief issued a stand-down order during the firefight. Some believe that he told contractors to wait rather than immediately rush in to aid the besieged compound. The CIA chief later stated that he never issued such an order. The entire episode made Congress quite angry. The images of a dead U.S. ambassador and the stand-down controversy infuriated members of Congress. They almost immediately called for hearings. And once that happened, as is usually the case in Washington, pretty much everything about the attack would become fodder for a massive political boxing match. And the person who was in the middle of that ring was Secretary of State for the Obama administration, Hillary Clinton. The attack on the Libyan compound would be a large personal problem for Mrs. Clinton, and it really wasn't about the actual events that transpired during the attack. It was something else, and it was related to her political future. Everyone knew that Hillary Rodham Clinton had a political future. Everybody knew that she would one day run for president. You could sense it even when she was First Lady in the 1990s. From the time Hillary Clinton arrived in Washington during her husband's administration, she was positioning herself for her own White House run. And that's probably why she took the job as Secretary of State in the Obama administration. Hillary Clinton needed to establish her foreign policy credentials. She was already a successful, respected lawyer, and she had also served as a senator from the state of New York. But she needed to prop up her foreign policy bona fides, and that's probably why she took the role of Secretary of State. And once she did take that job, well, everything was proceeding according to plan for her. Secretary Clinton established herself as a knowledgeable, respected international diplomat. But the disaster that would forever be known simply as Benghazi, well, that happened on her watch, and it threatened to derail her future. It was critical for Hillary Clinton to navigate the congressional hearings delicately to preserve her march towards the White House. In 2012 and 2013, Hillary Clinton testified before Congress about Benghazi. While those hearings were watched closely by Washington insiders and the press, in the eyes of the public, it was largely uneventful. On February 1st, 2013, Hillary Clinton stepped down as Secretary of State to focus on her upcoming run for the presidency. Later the following year, the House Intelligence Committee wrapped up its investigations into Benghazi and found no wrongdoing. Hillary Clinton was in the clear. It was over. Except that this is Washington, D.C., where nothing is over if there are still some political points to be won. So even though the House Intelligence Committee ended their investigation, some members of the body thought that the matter needed further review. They created the Select Committee on Benghazi and continued with the investigation of the event. Some would say that the committee was created because there were still important questions that needed to be answered. Others would say that the committee was created so that it could keep Hillary Clinton in what they hoped would be a negative spotlight while she ran for president. Which reason was the real reason? Probably both. But the reason didn't really matter, because the committee was formed and it was investigating. In April of 2015, Hillary Clinton released a YouTube video where she formally announced that she was running for president. On the surface, the announcement was a groundbreaking moment. Many in the country were excited by the prospect of electing the country's first female president. But something happened at the ongoing Benghazi hearings that had the potential to scuttle Mrs. Clinton's presidential ambitions before she even started to campaign. The House Select Committee on Benghazi sent routine document requests to the State Department asking for them to produce all communications they had about the attack. State Department lawyers began putting together that response. They looked for all communication from State Department officials like cables and phone records and emails. But when they searched their systems for emails to and from Secretary Clinton, they found nothing. State Department officials reached out to the now former Secretary Clinton and asked her to turn over any government-related emails that she might have. Clinton then delivered 55,000 pages of printed, work-related emails from her 4 years as Secretary of State. The State Department then sent some of those emails to the House Select Committee in response to the committee's information request. When the committee staff examined those documents, they noticed something unusual. The emails didn't come from a governmental email account. Instead, they originated from a domain entitled ClintonEmail.com. The committee pressed the State Department for an explanation, and the State Department basically said, "Listen, we gave you what we got from Hillary." About a week later, there was some clarity. That's because the New York Times reported that for the entire time she was Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton exclusively used a private email account to conduct government business. The article noted that Secretary Clinton didn't even have an official State Department email account during her tenure. It turned out that Secretary Clinton had conducted all of her official business through a personal email account hosted on a private server located in her home in Chappaqua, New York. Now, it wasn't completely unheard of for an official to use private email in their government business. But at the time, things were changing, and there were a series of new laws and executive orders that had recently been passed that dealt with that situation. And that's why the existence of the private server started to raise some eyebrows. It's probably for that reason that the nonpartisan Inspector General for the intelligence community asked to review some of those Clinton emails. After doing so, they became concerned. The Inspector General believed that there might have been classified material contained in the emails that Clinton kept on the server in her home. That could be a big problem. You see, that whole personal server thing might have constituted a serious crime. Some laws prohibit the storage of classified information on personal email systems, like the federal statute that makes it a felony to mishandle classified information. The Inspector General was apparently concerned about what they found in those Clinton emails, and they referred the matter to the FBI for investigation. The person that would take control of the investigation was a person who's in the news a bit today, a guy named James Comey. James Comey grew up in New York and New Jersey, and after college got his law degree from the University of Chicago Law School. After clerking and working at a prestigious firm, he joined the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan in the 1980s, where he got the chance to work under an up-and-coming star, U.S. Attorney Rudolph Giuliani. It was there that Comey cut his teeth prosecuting the Gambino crime family. But Jim Comey wouldn't get famous for going after the mafia. He truly made a name for himself the following decade when he went after a really dangerous person. That's right. James Comey was the lead prosecutor in the insider trading case against Martha Stewart. Lucky we got her off the street, huh? Comey went on to become U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, one of the most powerful prosecutor positions in the country. From there, President Bush appointed him Deputy Attorney General in 2003, and then after a stint in private practice and as General Counsel at Lockheed Martin, President Obama nominated the Republican James Comey to head the FBI in 2013. He had a 10-year term. Comey hardly got his feet wet in his job at the FBI when the Clinton-Benghazi email thing blew up. James Comey had to approach the investigation delicately. He wasn't simply investigating an issue about the possible mishandling of classified information that might have been committed by some random government official. He was investigating an allegation that was made against a person who was running for president. And he was doing it at the very time the presidential campaign was in full swing. To raise the stakes even higher, according to the polls at the time, the person he was investigating was likely to be elected President of the United States. The official investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server began in July of 2015. The FBI soon expanded their inquiry to determine if Clinton had jeopardized national security secrets. The presidential election was only 16 months away. I travel a lot as a continuing legal education speaker. That's what I do when I'm not recording podcasts. I've been everywhere from Alaska to Alberta to Alabama to Australia. During my travels, I've met a ton of celebrities in airports, train stations, and a variety of other places. But there are two famous people I've met that stick out the most. And it's not because of their amazing popularity. No, actually, these two people are only minor celebrities, if you can even call them that. These two people stick out because when I met them, I scared the living shit out of them. But I did it accidentally. The first is former New Jersey State Supreme Court Justice Roberto Rivera Soto. I had always been dying to meet Justice Soto for one reason. He wrote an opinion that disciplined a lawyer in a conflicts case that I found really, really interesting. I talk about the case in my class at Georgetown Law where I teach professional responsibility. And the case fascinates me not just because of the content, but because the lawyer disciplined was my father-in-law's divorce attorney. The case had nothing to do with the divorce, but the fact that I knew the lawyer in the case, it was just incredible. Anyway, I always hoped that I'd meet the justice just so I could ask him some questions about that opinion. And one day, I saw him. One fall, I was on the New Jersey Turnpike driving home from school. I used to teach professional responsibility at my alma mater, Rutgers Law in Camden. I did that before I went on to Georgetown. So I was on my way home from teaching, and I stopped at a Turnpike rest stop to grab a cup of coffee. I got my Java, and then as I walked toward the exit, I saw from a distance Justice Soto walking into the building. He was heading toward the bathrooms. I could not believe my eyes. I was so excited that I put my coffee down on the nearest table and I ran towards the justice. I sprinted towards him. Now you have to understand something. I'm 6 feet tall, well over 200 pounds. Justice Soto is about 5'3", 5'4" tops. So here you have a New Jersey Supreme Court justice who, let's face it, as a public official, he's probably received a nasty letter or two in his time, and he finds himself alone in a rest stop being charged by some maniac running towards him. I, of course, was oblivious to the fear that I was creating in this poor man's head. And when I reached him, I just blurted out my entire story. "Oh my goodness, Justice Soto, I'm so happy to see you. My father-in-law, in a conflicts case. You wrote an opinion. I promise if I ever meet you, I'd say..." Before I could make any sense, Justice Soto turned around and, in what was clearly a reflexive reaction to the terror I was apparently causing, bolted out the rest stop door and ran back to his car. Poor guy never even got to use the bathroom. By the way, if any of you know Justice Roberto Rivera Soto from the New Jersey Supreme Court, please apologize to him on my behalf. I'm sure he still remembers the event. The other person I scared was also from the legal world, but this time it was in an airport. I think it was in Columbia, South Carolina. I was doing laps walking around the airport. I was wasting time until my flight boarded. And from a distance, I thought I saw Attorney General Loretta Lynch. I walked by her and I looked in her face, and I was pretty sure it was her. But I wasn't completely sure, so I did a lap around the area, and then I circled back and walked by her again. I looked again, and this time it looked even more like her. So at that point, I did what any normal person would do. I circled back a third time, looked deep into her eyes, confirmed that it was her, and then I chased her up a set of stairs and asked for a selfie. I swear when I tapped her on the shoulder and she saw that it was the psycho who just tried to peer into her soul, I could see her life flash before her eyes. That was probably the last day she walked through an airport without security. I should not have been so surprised that Attorney General Loretta Lynch was apprehensive that day, because at work, she was under a lot of pressure. I ran into Loretta Lynch right around the time that the Hillary Clinton investigation was going on, and Loretta Lynch had just gotten involved in a controversial way. As Attorney General, Loretta Lynch was the head of the Department of Justice. And since the FBI is an agency within the Department of Justice, that meant that Loretta Lynch was Jim Comey's boss. It also meant that after Comey was done with his investigation, Loretta Lynch was the person who would ultimately decide whether criminal charges would be brought against Hillary Clinton. That's how the system works. The FBI investigates and recommends, and the Justice Department leadership decides whether to prosecute. But something unusual happened. On June 27, 2016, former President Bill Clinton was at the Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. It turns out, so was Loretta Lynch. So, Bill Clinton, whose wife was under investigation by an arm of the Department of Justice, he decided to pop in and say hello to his old friend, who just happened to be running that same Department of Justice. Bill Clinton boarded Lynch's plane while both were on the tarmac, and they had a conversation. They said they didn't talk about the Hillary investigation at all. They claimed that they had a casual social conversation for about a half hour where they talked about their grandchildren, golf, and other personal matters. There's no evidence that disputes their story. But it doesn't really matter because the optics of that meeting were awful. Even if they didn't do anything wrong, even if they didn't have a conversation about the investigation, it had the appearance of impropriety. I mean, think about it. Bill Clinton's wife was under FBI investigation, and here was the former president having a private meeting with the very person who would decide whether his wife would be prosecuted. It almost didn't matter what they actually talked about. The meeting itself created the perception that the investigation might not be handled impartially. When news of the meeting broke, Lynch faced immediate criticism from both Republicans and Democrats. She acknowledged that the meeting cast a shadow on the Justice Department's handling of the case. Lynch had to do something to preserve the integrity of the investigation. She could have recused herself, but she didn't. Instead, she took an action that she probably believed accomplished the same result. A few days after the tarmac meeting, Lynch announced that she would accept whatever recommendation the FBI made regarding the Clinton email investigation. She said she would not overrule the FBI's decision. The next day, Hillary Clinton was interviewed by the FBI for 3 hours. And 3 days later, James Comey was ready to announce his findings. At this point, it had been a year since Comey started his investigation into Hillary's emails. That investigation hung over the candidate's head like a black cloud. With each passing day, the very existence of the investigation followed the campaign as it marched toward what was supposed to be a massively crowning achievement, the formal nomination of Hillary Clinton as the party's candidate at the Democratic National Convention. And that convention, by this time, was right around the corner. James Comey must have known that the Democratic National Convention was coming up. He was basically a career government attorney, and that means he'd be attuned to the election cycle. So it shouldn't be too surprising that only 3 weeks before the convention, James Comey was ready to announce his findings of the investigation. But Comey wasn't just going to casually release his conclusions to the press. No, James Comey was going to make a spectacle. The director of the FBI was going to let the world know what he found by calling a press conference. Hillary must have been waiting for the results on pins and needles. She needed to be cleared before the convention. That way she could head down the final campaign stretch with a clear head. When James Comey started the press conference, it seemed like Hillary Clinton was in for a rough ride. Comey explained that during the FBI's investigation, they found that 110 emails contained classified information. 8 of those email chains contained information that was top secret, 36 contained secret information, and 8 of those email conversations contained confidential information. But then, James Comey let Hillary Clinton off the hook. He explained that his agency did not find clear evidence that Secretary Clinton or her colleagues intended to violate laws governing the handling of classified information. That is all Hillary Clinton wanted to hear. James Comey just told the world that she didn't break any laws. Hillary would have been thrilled if the press conference just stopped right there. It did not. What followed next was the most devastating vindication of Hillary Clinton that James Comey could have possibly delivered. Comey told the American people that Secretary Clinton and her colleagues were, quote, extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information. He said that any reasonable person in Secretary Clinton's position should have known that an unclassified email system was no place for conversations like those. Comey tore Hillary apart. He stated that, quote, none of these emails should have been on any kind of unclassified system, and that it was especially concerning because all of those emails were housed on unclassified personal servers that weren't supported by full-time security staff like those found at departments and agencies of the U.S. government or even with a commercial service like Gmail. And if Hillary thought it couldn't get any worse, she was wrong. Comey then explained that there was evidence. He said there was evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of the classified information. However, in his judgment, no reasonable prosecutor would bring the case. He came to that conclusion because even though there was evidence that the statutes were violated, there wasn't any willful mishandling of classified material. For that reason, he didn't think that a prosecutor would find it worthwhile to pursue a case. As a result, his agency recommended that no charges be brought against Secretary Clinton. And since we know that Loretta Lynch was not going to challenge the determination of the FBI, the matter was closed. This was certainly not the outcome Hillary had hoped for. I mean, the fact that the government would not be pursuing her for criminal charges was exactly what she was looking for, but the way it was conveyed to the American people was a political disaster. She must have been fuming. Comey didn't have to do all of that. It was unusual for an FBI director to be so bold in releasing his findings. A press conference like this would be highly irregular under normal circumstances, but to make such statements about the presumptive nominee of a major party candidate for president of the United States during what was basically already campaign season? It was simply unheard of. If Hillary could find any solace in the situation, it was this. At least it was over. Every once in a while, a politician arrives on the scene, and you just know he's going to make it big. That's how I felt when I first saw New York Congressman Anthony Weiner. Weiner was a fiery politician. Whether you agreed with him or not, you noticed him because he was loud, bold, and passionate about the causes he championed. He was small and thin and wiry, but he punched way above his weight. He was a Democratic attack dog whose confrontational style made him a cable news fixture, and that gave him a national profile. Anthony Weiner's take-no-prisoners approach to politics got him elected to Congress for 7 terms. Many saw him as the future mayor of New York, maybe even more. Anthony Weiner had it all. He had a safe position in Congress, a bright future in politics, and he was one half of a Democratic power couple. Anthony Weiner was married to Huma Abedin, who happened to be one of Hillary Clinton's most trusted advisors. But the no-holds-barred style that fueled Anthony Weiner's political ambitions also seemed to be fueling something more sinister inside the man. On May 27, 2011, a grainy photo appeared on Anthony Weiner's Twitter account. It was a picture of a man wearing tighty-whities. But it wasn't a picture of the man's entire body. The photo was just of, shall we say, the man's package. The photo of a man's crotch was posted on Weiner's Twitter account publicly, visible to all of his followers, but it was quickly deleted. Weiner responded immediately. He claimed that he was hacked. He tried to dispense with it all. He said something like, "People get hacked all the time. We just need to move on." But something was off. When reporters pressed him, he became evasive, and he wouldn't say whether the photo was actually of him. Conservative blogger Andrew Breitbart wasn't buying it. He kept digging, and when he did, women started coming forward. There was a 21-year-old college student in Seattle, a 26-year-old blackjack dealer in Las Vegas, and a 40-year-old single mother in Texas. Each had their own cache of explicit photos and flirtatious messages from Weiner's accounts. It turned out that the congressman had been sending shirtless photos, discussing sexual fantasies, and carrying on virtual affairs with women he'd never met. For 9 excruciating days, Weiner tried to thread an impossible needle. He gave interviews where he laughed nervously, dodged questions, and insisted that his account had been compromised, but then he refused to report it to authorities. He held press conferences that raised more questions than they answered. And those press conferences became spectacles. Reporters were shouting questions. Weiner's voice grew strained. On June 6, 2011, he finally broke. At a press conference in New York, his voice cracking, tears welling up in his eyes, Anthony Weiner admitted everything. He'd sent explicit photos to approximately 6 women over 3 years. He'd engaged in inappropriate online relationships, and he'd lied about it. To the public, to the colleagues, to his staff, to everybody. But he wasn't resigning from Congress. Why? Anthony Weiner was a career politician. He knew that politicians can behave badly, but they can also be forgiven. Weiner surely believed that if he could just wait things out, he could salvage his career. But the pressure mounted. Democratic leadership called for him to step down. His constituents were humiliated, and so was his wife, Huma Abedin, who, incidentally, just found out that she was pregnant with their first child. How about that for timing? The final straw seems to be when TMZ posted photos of Weiner in various states of undress that he apparently took inside a gym locker room. On June 16, 2011, less than 3 weeks after the first photo appeared, Anthony Weiner resigned from Congress. Despite his public humiliation, his wife stuck by his side. Weiner was probably thrilled he'd need the support of his politically powerful spouse, whose close contact with Hillary Clinton could only benefit the politician. He would need that connection because, despite this setback, Anthony Weiner was not about to give up on his political aspirations. The firebrand Anthony Weiner would not be held down for long. A few years later, in April of 2013, Weiner announced that he was running for mayor of New York City. The narrative of his campaign? It would be a theme that just might work if he played his cards right. Redemption. But Anthony Weiner never got a chance to play that hand. His campaign was doomed from the start because shortly after announcing his candidacy, a website published new sexting exchanges. Weiner had been at it again, even after his resignation from Congress and even after his wife said she'd support him. At a press conference with Abedin beside him, Weiner admitted to more inappropriate relationships. And things got worse when the public started to mock him. Oh yeah, that's what happened when they learned that in those sexting exchanges, he was going by the alias of Carlos Danger. Anthony Weiner's poll numbers cratered, and he finished the New York mayor's race with less than 5% of the vote. In the normal world, that would be the last we heard about Anthony Weiner. But politicians don't live in the normal world. They constantly seek the spotlight, and in this case, Anthony Weiner, well, he probably wished he would have gone unnoticed. First, the New York Post published yet more pictures of Weiner sending provocative pictures to women. This time, however, he took a photo of himself in his underwear while his small son slept next to him. When his wife saw those pictures, she decided she had enough. The day that story broke, Weiner's wife, Huma Abedin, announced their separation. Then, in September of 2016, the Daily Mail published a bombshell. Weiner had been sexting with yet another person, but this time it wasn't a woman. It was a 15-year-old girl. According to documents filed in the case and statements later made to court, the girl sent Weiner a direct message on Twitter. From the very beginning, she told him that she was in high school. Despite that knowledge, Weiner participated in increasingly suggestive exchanges over Facebook Messenger, Skype, and other platforms. In one Snapchat message, Weiner asked the girl to do graphic and obscene things, and he said things that an adult man should not be saying to a young teenage girl. Weiner also sent the girl pornography. During some of the Skype calls, the girl specifically told Weiner that she was only 15 years old. This went on for months. Because of the serious nature of the crimes, the FBI opened a criminal investigation of Anthony Weiner into potential child exploitation. As part of that investigation, agents executed a search warrant on Anthony Weiner's devices, his iPhone, iPad, and a laptop. That laptop was a computer that he shared with his wife. And that's where they found them. When the FBI investigators conducted their forensic analysis of Anthony Weiner's laptop, they discovered official State Department emails that were sent between Weiner's wife, Huma Abedin, and her boss, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. There were 2,800 work-related emails between Abedin and Clinton on Anthony Weiner's computer, and some of those emails came from the private server located at Hillary's home. Several of those messages were marked classified. According to Politico, the emails containing classified information dealt with talks between the Palestinian terror group Hamas and the PLO. They contained information about a call to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and they addressed conversations with the foreign minister from the United Arab Emirates. There was also a message containing talking points about an upcoming release of documents by a group known as WikiLeaks. By the time FBI Director James Comey found out about the situation, it was already October. Election day for the presidential race was weeks away. He could not have been put in a worse position. James Comey faced an impossible choice. Did he reveal the discovery of those emails or stay silent? Both options had awful consequences. If he stayed quiet, didn't say anything, and then Hillary Clinton went on to win, well, the emails would eventually surface, and it would appear that the FBI had concealed evidence to protect her. On the other hand, if he spoke up, he'd be accused of interfering in the election. Comey was leaning towards disclosing the emails. But according to the New Yorker magazine, his boss, Loretta Lynch, didn't think that that was the right move. She privately told the FBI chief that he should follow the department's long-standing practice of not commenting on ongoing investigations and not taking any action that could influence an election. But Comey didn't seem to agree. He was leaning towards revealing the emails and doing it immediately. As for his boss's objection, well, it didn't really matter. There wasn't a whole lot she could do. That ill-advised meeting she had with Bill Clinton at the airport basically required the Attorney General to take a back seat in the matter. On October 28, 2016, James Comey reopened the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. He sent a letter to Congress announcing that the Bureau was reviewing emails that, quote, appeared to be pertinent to the Clinton investigation. It was 11 days before the election. When the news of the emails broke, it was like a political nuclear bomb went off. The press eviscerated Comey. It's worth hearing what the New Yorker magazine said at the time Comey made this announcement. They said, quote, Comey's decision is a striking break with the policies of the Department of Justice, according to current and former federal legal officials. Comey, who is a Republican appointee of President Obama, has a reputation for integrity and independence, but his latest action is stirring an extraordinary level of concern among legal authorities who see it as potentially affecting the outcome of the presidential and congressional elections. "You don't do this," one former senior Justice Department official exclaimed. "It's aberrational. It violates decades of practice." The presidential campaign just exploded. Clinton's poll numbers dropped. Trump seized on the revived investigation at every rally, calling it a vindication. Democrats accused Comey of sabotaging the election, and Republicans demanded immediate answers about what was in the emails. The FBI obtained a search warrant to formally examine the laptop's contents. Investigators worked around the clock. On November 6th, just 2 days before the election, 2 days before the presidential election, James Comey sent another letter to Congress. This entire letter was 5 sentences long. He said that the FBI had reviewed the emails and that their conclusion had not changed. No charges would be filed. 2 days later, Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton in what many believe was the most colossal upset in American politics. If you ask Hillary Clinton why she lost to Donald Trump, she's probably going to lay the blame at the feet of James Comey. She will tell you that the damage Comey caused when he reopened that case right before the election was irreparable. Sure, political analysts who aren't as invested in the outcome as the actual candidate, well, they might tell you that there were a variety of reasons for Hillary Clinton's loss. But you cannot deny that the whole email scandal, occurring so close to Election Day, it just had to have some effect. The story dominated the final crucial days of the campaign. And that is why Hillary Clinton hates James Comey. Of course, I'm sure she's not alone. A ton of people from her campaign and oodles of her supporters probably also hate James Comey. And because of all that, the recent indictment of James Comey, it's actually going to be interesting political theater. Under normal circumstances, you'd expect Democrats to line up behind Comey and come to his defense because that would be their opportunity to bash Trump. That's the obvious political move, right? They believe Trump is pursuing a political vendetta, and they see this as nothing more than Donald Trump getting revenge against his political enemies. But there are a whole lot of Democrats who simply cannot stomach lining up behind the man that they believe not only robbed their candidate of the presidency, but in the process irreparably damaged the country. The only person those people hate more than Donald Trump is James Comey. So it's going to be super interesting to watch how the Comey case pans out. Oh, and just in case you're wondering, in May of 2017, Anthony Weiner pleaded guilty to transferring obscene materials to a minor. He was sentenced to 21 months in federal prison. His laptop and his compulsions might have altered the course of American history. Thank you for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I look forward to seeing you again on the Good Lawyers Gone Bad podcast.